Oh Amazon, why do you hate us so? I mean, I know people often make jokes about movie reviewers like myself having to suffer through bad content so that they don't have to, but Rings of Power Season 2 is one of the rare cases where I actually began to feel it. To put this into some kind of perspective, I once climbed the highest mountain in the UK on a boiling hot day with an absolutely stinking hangover every step of the way, and that experience was less of a slog than getting through 3 episodes of this show in time for open bar. It was, to put it bluntly, one of the most miserable and depressingly tedious media experiences of my entire career that somehow found new and creative ways to defecate on Tolkien's legacy and prove once again that modern culture is an absolute blight on humanity. From the cringe-inducing dialogue straining for grandiose pomposity and peppered with so many tortured metaphors that the writer should be arrested for crimes against literature, to the idiotic character choices and a ridiculously convoluted plot held together by so many conveniences and shortcuts that it makes J.J. Abrams look like Christopher Nolan, to the overwrought performances by a cast of effeminate Gen Z pussies that ticks almost every diversity box except acting ability, to the ham-fisted direction and oversaturated cinematography that's so dark you literally can't see what the fuck is even going on half the time. It all adds up to $1 billion slab of arse cancer that shames the legacy of Lord of the Rings and makes a complete mockery out of everything that Tolkien stood for. Put another way, the Rings of Power Season 2 fucking sucks. Now, I'm going to do my best to summarise whatever passes for a plot here, but in the interests of my own sanity, I'm going to speedrun this shit, because the less time I have to spend talking about Rings of Power, the better. Anyway, allow me to give you the meat and give it to you raw. The show gets off to the worst possible start by devoting a good 20 minutes to an extended flashback sequence explaining how Sauron got betrayed by his own lieutenant and eventually got reborn as Halbrand before running into Galadriel.
Not a great plan.
Why are you wasting all this time by telling us stuff that we already know? Do you guys even understand what storytelling is? Or is this whole thing just an amusing little side project for you? Also, I love the idea that Sauron, a godlike being of unimaginable power and influence, commanding armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands by the sheer force of his will, is reduced to this dork in a shitty wig trying to argue with a couple of dozen orcs in a cave somewhere. For a show that cost $1 billion, Rings of Power somehow manages to make everything that should be grand and epic feel small and cheap. I mean, do you really think an entity as powerful as Sauron would need to argue his case to get orcs to follow him? Anyway, they decide that they don't like him anymore, so they stab him to death, but then his blood turns into a flumpy black goo monster that eventually climbs out of the mountain and rolls down the side like a turd until it gets stuck in the wheels of someone's wagon before it eats them. This is real, this is stuff which actually happens in this show. Honestly, I could probably spend an hour breaking down this opening scene alone because it perfectly encapsulates how the writers completely misunderstand almost every aspect of what Sauron is, but let's just keep moving for God's sake. So eventually we get back to the present day where Sauron allows himself to get captured in Mordor and brought before Adar, who for some reason doesn't recognise him or sense his power, and manages to convince the guy to release him by using the following gambits. Sauron is alive again, and I know you want him dead, even though I totally shouldn't know that because you betrayed him hundreds of years before I should have been born, but don't think about that too much. And I don't actually know where he is or what he looks like now, but the important thing is that he's totally not me, and if you let me go, then I can go to the elves and maybe find out where he is and then report back to you so that you can march your not particularly strong armies halfway across Middle-earth to the most heavily defended stronghold in the entire world and possibly take him out. And I'll totally do all of that and not just disappear and never come back. Trust me, bro. And the amazing thing is, it actually works. So he teleports over to Celebrimbor and says that it's ringing time, buddy. And even though Celebrimbor has been specifically warned never to deal with him again, Sauron transforms into a fire demon angel thing and he's like, don't worry man, I've been sent from heaven to help you out. Trust me, bro. So Celebrimbor's like, sure, okay, I'm convinced. Meanwhile, Elrond steals the 3 elven rings that have already been made and decides to destroy them because they might be influenced by Sauron, but fucking Doughboy here wants them anyway because he already wears more finger jewelry than your average gypsy taxi driver, so Elrond throws himself off a waterfall and magically survives so that the rest of the plot can happen. But then they catch him anyway and use the rings to bring the elf trees back to life or something. Then there's Gandalf and the not hobbits who are wandering through the fucking desert looking for stars or something. None of them seem to know or care why they're in this show anyway, and frankly neither do I. But I did kind of laugh when we get introduced to this doofus played by Kieran Hines. Literally, this was your one chance to introduce a racially diverse character and have it actually make sense in universe, and you chose possibly the whitest actor in the entire fucking industry to play him. What is wrong with your brains? Like, do they just not operate like regular brains or what? Also, it's nice to see the real Grim Shady make a comeback because those guys totally weren't a laughingstock from the first season. Oh yeah, and Isildur is alive again because wow, it turns out that baiting the death of a major character that we know can't die yet wasn't the best way of sustaining dramatic tension. Neither was bringing back Don Lemonlass, who was a pointless character even in season 1 and hasn't changed much here. It did make me laugh though when they had to explain away the death of Bronwyn even though she was totally alive and well at the end of season 1. Yeah, those orc arrows just take a while to kill you, I guess. Don't think about it too much. There's also a tedious storyline in Moria where the dwarves are running out of food, but they can't do anything about it until Durin and his father reconcile, but they won't because they're basically idiotic children now, I guess. And lastly, there's a growing power struggle in downtown Numenor where discount Karl Marx is trying to stage a coup against diverse female queen, and he's so smart about it that he literally talks openly about overthrowing her in the middle of a crowded tavern. Truly, it's the last thing they'd be expecting. You know, one of the big questions going into season 2 was, would they have learned any lessons from the nuclear level backlash they took in season 1? Do you think we should hire better writers, better directors, and better lore experts? Should we tone down the girl bossies and the weird Sauron Galadriel romance angle and the forced diversity and the clumsy political allegories? Nah, it'll be fine. Everything that was bad in season 1 is somehow even worse here. There's all the usual tropes like the girl bossies who fight and strategize right alongside the men as if that's normal procedure, the modern metropolitan diversity projected hilariously onto northern European medieval cultures that totally don't support it, but bizarrely absent from the Middle Eastern cultures where it would actually make sense, the cheap looking sets, and the actors who look like they're allergic to testosterone, but that's just what we expect from modern Hollywood. The dialogue is so clumsy and long-winded and pompous, so blatantly trying to replicate the epic tone of the books that it actually had me gritting my teeth. Even Ian McKellen couldn't make verbal diarrhea like this sound good, and no offense to the actors, but they ain't exactly on Ian McKellen's level. In fact, no, fuck it, all offense to them because they suck at their jobs. They've had like 2 years to up their game, and if anything, they come across as even worse than before. Characters range from idiotic to the point of actual medical retardation to making such insane leaps of logical deduction that it can only ever be in service of the plot. Writing sophisticated characters like elves is always going to be a challenge because each of them has got thousands of years of wisdom and experience to convey, and well, this show is proof that a character is only ever as smart as their writer, and that ain't much. Then there's the morality question. Season 1 had only a tenuous understanding of the morality of Tolkien's world, and that understanding seems to have completely vanished here. The show seems to want us to empathise with the orcs for some reason, like they're some misunderstood oppressed minority or something. There's literally a scene where an orc begs his commander not to send him off to war before hovering protectively over his orc wife and baby. That is horrific. You still would though, wouldn't you? I mean, do you not understand that orcs are not individuals in the sense that humans are? They're a force of nature. They're a blunt instrument to be wielded by evil. They don't care if they charge into battle and get slaughtered by the hundreds. They exist only for war. In the Two Towers, they get spawned into existence, have a helmet slapped onto their head and a sword thrust into their hand, and their first question is literally, what do you want me to kill and destroy? They don't have private lives and you can't make me empathise with them. They are monsters. At this point, Tolkien must be spinning in his grave so fast that you could hook him up to a dynamo and power the entire national grid with him. This show is quite simply an abomination, a ruined, corrupted form of entertainment, twisted and mutilated, lost beyond all hope of redemption. And if Amazon had any common sense whatsoever, they would cast it into the fire, destroy it before it consumes us all. Anyway, that's all I've got for today, thank fuck. Go away now!